Heyo, welcome back to Rice and Beans. Thank you for joining us. With us today is the wonderful Nikki. Nikki,
Hi.
hello. Where are you from, Nikki?
I am from Miami, Florida. My family is from Venezuela. When people ask me where I'm from, though, I typically say I'm Venezuelan.
That's cool, Venezuela. So,
Yes.
today we're learning about Venezuela. That's awesome. We haven't had anyone on Rice and Beans from Venezuela before. Yes, I am Colombian myself, so let's get into it.
Yes.
So, let's start off with the first important thing about Rice and Beans. You already know that we go into food first. So, let's talk about some Venezuelan cuisine.
So, Venezuela's famous plate, or I think their national plate, if that's a thing, from country to country, is called a pabellon, and it has a lot of different things in there. But some of the staples are plantains, carne asada, which I don't know what the direct translation is, but carne asada.
Like fried beef.
Is it fried? I don't think I saw it.
That's like the literal, I don't know, just cooked.
No,
It's like,
that is fried.
it's kind of like shredded beef.
No, shredded beef would be carne mechada.
Oh.
So the funny thing is that in the same plate, we have carne mechada and carne asada. It doesn't make any sense.
Wow.
There are two proteins in there. Okay,
Oh,
whatever.
there's a lot of protein.
Yeah, but then we also have rice and beans
Oh,
in
yeah.
that same plate, it's black beans, so black beans and white rice. And I said the plantains, carne mechada. And so empanadas are a really big thing in Venezuela, which you could put anything basically in an empanada. Typically they're made of cheese or meat, just cheese or just meat.
So it's like a pocket.
Yeah, basically. It's basically a pocket. It's closed. A closed pocket. But some people even make a pabellon empanada.
Oh.
So they just stuff everything that's on that plate I mentioned
Holy cow.
in an empanada. So it would have rice, beans, plantains, and two types of meat.
How big is this?
It's huge. It's maybe this big.
It seems like it's one dish to experience everything.
Yeah, basically.
All in one nice little package.
In a nice little pocket.
That's so convenient.
Yeah, and we also have tequeños, which are a lot of people, American people who try them are like, is this just a mozzarella stick? And I'm like, no, because the dough isn't fried. I think it's the same concept though. It's breaded, but it's not crummy. It's folded around the cheese.
I see.
And then you put it in the oven.
Kind of like a myelinated axon.
I don't think I've ever tried that.
Oh, me neither. Oh man. So, is there a specific dance style that comes from Venezuela? So, I've been told by my associate that you are a dancer.
Oh yeah, I do dance. Right now I dance salsa, merengue, and bachata. So I learned salsa, merengue from my family. I wouldn't say they're Venezuelan dances, but they are something that people dance at family parties in Venezuela. I think mostly merengue. People love merengue.
Oh yeah.
We never did bachata in Venezuela though.
That's strange because I don't really remember dancing bachata too much in Colombia, but
Yeah.
it's a while ago. But still.
Yeah. I think bachata is more of a Dominican thing. Or even
For
an
sure.
American thing. When people start learning different Latin styles,
Yeah,
they
it's
learn
kind of
bachata.
like entry level.
Yeah. But Venezuela also has this more, I don't want to use the word indigenous because I don't think it is, but it has its roots in indigenous culture, and it's called joropo, and it's with drums, and it's very lively, and I've only ever seen my grandma dance it.
Oh.
I've never seen any other people.
Is there a way to describe it verbally?
It's fast footwork, but it's not convoluted footwork. You kind of just like shaking your upper body, not shaking, but moving it, and the men typically walk around the woman showing them off and presenting with their hands what the woman is doing, and she's basically just moving. It's not very complicated.
Yeah.
But it definitely takes, from what I've seen, a certain rhythm to do it.
So it's joropo?
Joropo.
Joropo. All right. So guys, if you're interested in seeing that, I would advise looking up because some art forms are undescribable in words.
Yes, this is true.
Okay, yeah. So something that we see around on the news sometimes when Venezuela comes up is what's going on there in terms of the government.
Yeah.
Would you be able to give us a portrait from your perspective as to what is actually happening?
So it all started with the previous president, who I hesitate to even use the word president for him because he was already leaning towards dictatorship, but he passed. But it started with him, and he's kind of like came to power with like a
What was his name?
populist Hugo Chavez. So he came to power with like a very populist socialist stance,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
guess you could say, and like basically saying how much he was going to help the poor, and so a lot of poor people who had never voted before
I
began
see.
voting, and that's how he came to power. And a lot of like, so I actually wrote a paper on this when I was in high school.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, it was on indoctrination in like elementary schools, because they started getting their textbooks from Cuba, because like at the time, so maybe you've heard this, but like a lot of the intervention in the Venezuelan government as it was transitioning into this dictatorship like environment that
Yeah.
we now have with the new president, who I will get into, or not really president, dictator. They started getting like a lot of help from Fidel, and
Oh, I see.
so like they were basically like trying to use Venezuela to make it have a similar experience slash revolution slash issues
Yeah,
that
like
Cuba had.
Okay, so it was kind of like good to. It was so you're able to look at the Cuban the development of the Cuban powers in parallel with Venezuelan powers.
Yeah,
not
some
not
people
necessarily
have.
like temporally, but just
Yes. So I wouldn't be able to speak to that necessarily, but I have heard people who are a little more well versed in like politics,
Yeah.
like Latin American politics, talk about it that way. That if you study the beginnings of Cuba's communist revolution, what you see is like very much so what's happening in Venezuela right now, or what was happening a while ago, and now it's like just it's progressing in that direction. So it started with him,
Yeah.
and then when he died, he appointed this guy who was not even in a position in government. He was like a bus driver. Some people guess.
people's guy.
Yeah, he was like
What's
really.
his name?
His name is Nicolás Maduro.
Maduro.
Yeah, which
Okay.
is like food, so that's a little weird. But he is not equipped. Like even people that hate Chavez and are obviously like on the opposing party, will admit that Chavez at least had like political experience, whereas this guy is just literally a guy
I
that
see.
he found that he wanted to lead the country.
So who knocked down the train of dominoes here?
What do you mean?
Like, when did this start kind of going to catastrophe?
Well, I mean, I guess it depends on like when you consider catastrophe to be catastrophe. Some people, and I think that can also be discussed in the context of like when people started leaving in droves.
Yeah.
Which I think was mostly with Maduro, not with Chavez.
Okay.
Because I think with Chavez, people were still hopeful that after Chavez,
Yeah.
somebody else would
I
come.
see.
Yeah. But my parents, at least, didn't come. They came at the very beginning, if not before Chavez came into power.
Which was when? Like, what year?
They came in 90. I was born in 98, so they came in 96.
I see.
Yeah, they came to the States 2 years before. So my parents didn't actually leave Venezuela because of the political environment. They left because, like, typical immigrant story, they wanted a better opportunities
yeah.
for their kid. It just so happened that they were lucky enough to get out
Oh, sure.
before everything got bad. But now, actually, I have much less family in Venezuela than I used to.
Where did they all go?
So, I'll list them.
We like talking about immigrant stories as well on Rice and Beans.
Nice. Yeah, so there are a lot of like Latin American countries that are starting to see huge populations of Venezuela, like little pockets of Venezuelans.
Oh, yeah.
So like those who can go to Miami. Those who cannot go for other countries, because if they come to the United States, they typically start in Miami. If they're gonna go anywhere else after Miami, or stay in Miami, and that so that's what a lot of people did. But I have family in Germany now.
Oh.
I have family in Spain now. I have family in Panama now. I have family in Chile now.
So when did all this immigration in your family take place?
So like I said, my parents came before it got bad.
Yeah.
So I think I can't give you like a year.
That's fine.
But I can give you like...
Was it basically after your parents came?
Yeah, it was all after my parents came. Because
Okay.
they started leaving once it got bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, because... So a lot of... So my generation is leaving because they're going to school. So instead of looking for school options in Venezuela, they'll look for school options elsewhere.
I see.
So I have a cousin that was going to University of Michigan, and now she was waiting on a worker visa because she graduated recently, and she didn't get it. So she's going
geez.
to Holland.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty. They speak English there.
Do they?
Yeah. It's
Okay,
like
good.
Everyone speaks English, and it's strange.
perfect.
I wish I could interview someone from there, but we'll have to wait for future Ice and Bees episodes
Yeah.
to really get into Holland.
Yeah, but she struggled a lot in university, because even then
In Michigan?
Yeah, because Venezuela has this program for students who go abroad to the U.S., but like that program was like crumbling because the government was crumbling.
Yeah.
So like a lot of her education was not covered, and her parents were really struggling to pay for her education from afar.
Oh, yeah.
So our grandparents stepped in and were helping her. So I think we're lucky enough to have a little bit more resources than some Venezuelan families do. And I think a good distinction of like when things got really bad for Venezuela is the fact that suddenly people who couldn't afford to leave were leaving anyway. So before them, and there's like a little bit of like contention on that in like Miami, for example, because in Miami, Venezuelans were typically perceived as like very like they were like middle class or upper middle class, or even like not first class. How do you say that? Upper class.
Upper class?
Yes, upper class. They were typically seen as like very respectful and like hard workers and things like that. But then suddenly, groups of people with less resources started coming to Miami, and suddenly the perspective of like Venezuelans started changing, because there wasn't people with like money.
That's very interesting how that happens.
And it's like classist too, because like these people are just escaping like a horrible situation in their country. But that's how it be in the United States. So.
Yeah, and that also just it goes to show how far of a reach that the Venezuelan government has on just people's lives. The fact that your cousin was in Michigan, all the way in Michigan, and just what's happening over there is negatively affecting her over here.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunate to see, and I bet there's millions of others just like in a similar situation.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. Like, when you see the different protests that happen, so from Miami, like, we obviously see a lot of Venezuelans come out, but, like, if you look at pictures on Twitter, for example, of protests in other countries, the communities are getting larger and larger of Venezuelans in other countries that are protesting, or even, like, going out to vote.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't want to, like, okay, so don't quote me on this, but I think at some point there were rules about, like, you couldn't vote if you were in certain countries, and that's like difficult too, because like I'm sure they have some insight on like where, because the people leaving Venezuela aren't necessarily always of the opposing party, so maybe the government has some kind of insight as to what countries has Venezuelan communities of people that are just the opposing party.
I see.
And they're restricting them from voting, so it's like. But then the whole voting situation is BS. Sorry, I don't know if I can say that. So there's
like, thank you for censoring it. But so it seems to be like there's not only government corruption, but there's just inexperience in the government as well?
I don't know, because there's some people that like, I feel like it's not inexperience. It's like threatening. It's a threatening environment if they're not with the politicians. Yeah.
Oh, I see. It's
like political. There are a lot of political prisoners. Like one very well-known one is Leopoldo Lopez, and he came to the United States for his university education. But then he was back in Venezuela, and he was imprisoned, and it was a whole thing. And his wife did a whole campaign, and it was a huge deal. I think I'm pretty sure he's still imprisoned. But
so where do you think this is going?
Honestly, I don't see it getting any better anytime soon. Obviously, the students have not stopped their efforts and being on the streets and doing whatever they can. But at this point, I feel like people are just trying to survive. Like, there's no medicine in hospitals. Yeah. Or like, if they don't have the means to get out, they do what they can. But that means, like, to some extent, like, not adequate nutrition. Like, there's not electricity all the time. You have to like time yourself, meaning like maybe you're not going to shower every day, maybe you're going to shower like every 2 days, every 3 days, because of the water, whatever. It's just not a livable situation. And like, for example, my grandma recently got sick, and we had to like scramble here to see if anybody could find a connection that might get us a medication that was not available in Venezuela.
Oh, I imagine. That's
crazy. Like, that to me was just like an example of like how bad things have gotten.
It is a very good example, in fact.
Yeah.
But all right, I'm sorry to hear that, and that kind of stinks.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the bright side of Venezuela.
Yay!
So who are some famous Venezuelans?
So Fez from that 70s show is actually half Colombian, half Venezuelan.
Ooh.
Yeah, he's one of my favorites. And then this actor named Edgar Ramirez is also Venezuelan, and he played. He was in the movie Joy with Jennifer Lawrence, which was a biopic. I'm pretty sure it was about this entrepreneur, but he wasn't like a main role in that by any means. But he was in that movie with her, and he also played a boxer in a movie that was also a biopic, and I can't remember which boxer it was about. Do you follow boxing at all?
I do not.
I wish I knew, but he was in that one, and that was like a big movie as well. His name is Edgar Ramirez. Who else is Venezuelan?
I think that's enough.
Yeah.
Anything else that's like interesting or just notable that you want to bring up about Venezuela as we close it off?
I think Venezuelan students are very, like, besides being extremely like resilient and like in the sense that they're the ones like fighting this fight really, as is usually the case in most like situations like this. The college students are the ones that rise up. They're also like extremely well prepared. Last year, I believe it was a Model UN like nationals conference at Harvard University. Venezuela won.
Oh.
Yeah, like the Venezuelan university
team?
that was there.
Oh, that's so
it was.
cool.
I think it was from La Simón Bolívar, which is I think, if not the best university in Venezuela, it's one of the best. Yeah, and they were competing against like other American schools and like whatever top schools in the U.S. and they won, and that was a huge deal. I remember like the WhatsApp thread of like videos of people going like freaking out at the actual award ceremony. That was pretty cool. But that's just an example of like how well prepared.
Yeah. So let's see. So Venezuela, crumbling government, but it seems like the future is pretty strong, resilient, and eventually they're going to become the current generation or the powerful generation. So with their genetic ties to Venezuela, who knows what we might see.
Yeah, I feel like people are going to continue, Venezuelan people in different countries are going to continue doing good work.
Yeah.
But I don't know about like the country itself. I don't know how that's going to go. I wouldn't be surprised if it went down the same route as Cuba and or many other communist countries. But I think the people who represent Venezuela from wherever they had to go will represent it well.
Yeah, that's the impression I've been getting from this.
Yeah.
All right, guys, thank you for tuning into Rice and Beans. This has been the wonderful Nikki and your host, Beans. Actually, Rice is here for alumni weekend, but he's not going to come because he always flakes. All right, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget that the weekly meal playlist on Spotify is updated weekly with all these diverse tunes for you to listen to. Anyway, have a great week, guys. See you next time.